Hey all, my name is My Hope is in Him, and this video is titled Fulfillment or Destroyed. There is question and curiosity in how Jesus fulfilled the law, or at least curiosity in how I and others believe he fulfilled the law. In this message, I would like to go into detail on that. The Bible shares with us that God made a covenant at Mount Sinai, but that he also made another covenant with us at the cross. But what is a covenant? The definition is a binding agreement. Now, the term covenant isn't used much in our world today. Rather, the word contract is used. The definition of a contract is to enter into or make an agreement. An agreement between two or more parties, especially one that is written and enforceable by law. So the two are the same. A contract covenant is an agreement made between man and God. It contains terms and conditions that must be completed before the contract covenant can be termed complete, and man can receive what was promised in the covenant. He gave a promise of what he would do if they fulfilled his terms and conditions in the Old Covenant. This can be found in Leviticus chapter 26, verses 3 to 13. And he also gave a warning of what would be done if they didn't fulfill his terms and conditions. That is found in Leviticus 26, from 14 onward. But we know that the people continuously broke his contract, didn't they? They never fulfilled what was required of them. They continuously fell short. I want you to consider something for a moment, and hopefully this will help make better sense as to the route I'm going. Let's look at this from a modern day perspective. A landowner hires a construction company to build him a house on his newly acquired land. They enter into a contract in which the landowner sets terms and conditions that must be followed, and they have set a date by which it must be complete. If all goes well, they get the discussed payment in return. 4 months goes by and the deadline is closing. The owner comes to look at the job being done and finds it all going according to plan. The construction company fulfilled the entire contract before the deadline and receives the payment accordingly. The contract is then fulfilled, and both parties are released from it. The contract wasn't destroyed. It didn't fail. It was simply complete. Neither party is bound under its binding power anymore. The contract fulfilled its purpose. The contract is still there, but it no longer has power over either party because it has been completed and is now laid aside to make way for the next one. I want you to consider a second scenario. You should see the relation of what I'm going to go on to speak about after you read it. A landowner hires a construction company to build him a house on his newly acquired land. They enter into a contract in which the landowner sets terms and conditions that must be followed, and they have set a date by which it must be complete. If all goes well, they get the discussed payment in return. 4 months goes by and the deadline is approaching. The owner comes to see how the job is going. He notices that they've come up short on the conditions. One of their workers has fallen ill, and they aren't able to do the electrical wiring, and there is no one else who can finish it for them. The next day, the landowner, who has electrical experience, takes on the form of a construction worker and applies himself to the task of finishing the electrical work in the house so that the contract would be fulfilled at the required time. The construction company had no hope of finishing the work. They'd fallen short. So the owner, who was able to do what they could not, finished the work for them, fulfilling the contract. Thanks to the owner, the contract, which couldn't be fulfilled by the company themselves, was fulfilled by the owner, who came in the likeness of a construction worker and did it for them. And they, as a result, could receive the promised payment. Since the contract is complete, both parties are released from it, and it is no longer binding to them. It no longer has any power over them. He can't use that contract against them once it's complete. And they aren't stuck under the power of it either. It is laid aside. It is not destroyed. It doesn't disappear from the face of the earth. It is simply laid aside so that a second contract could be signed. When a covenant is completed, there is nothing more that can be done to make it any more complete. You have to move on to the next one. The next one might contain some of the same terms and conditions, but just because it has a few of the same terms and conditions, that doesn't mean the old covenant has become binding again. This is a completely new contract with its own terms and conditions. Do you see something familiar in the second scenario? Consider what would have happened had the construction company refused the extra hand, refused the help from the mysterious party. The contract wouldn't be complete, and they'd still be forced trying to complete it themselves, and they would fail. The contract would be broken, and the owner, as much as he would have wanted to, couldn't have given them what he promised at the beginning. God made a covenant with man on Mount Sinai. This covenant required mankind to fulfill his terms and conditions 100%. Galatians 3:10 says, "For as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse, for it is written, Cursed is everyone that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law, and do them." In order to receive the promises in the covenant that God made with Moses on Mount Sinai, one had to do all the things which are written in the book of the law. That was a mighty tall order. There were 613 laws written in the book. Failure to keep even one meant the contract would be broken. Even before the law, man went against their conscience and did that which what they knew was wrong in their heart. So every single man, according to the Bible, has fallen short of God's glory. Romans 3:23, "For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God." Psalms 53:3 says, "Every one of them is gone back. They are altogether become filthy. There is none that doeth good, no, not one." All mankind has sinned. They've all received the curse. Just like the construction worker, mankind has fallen ill and was unable to fulfill the covenant. It didn't matter how much work they tried to do, they would always come up short. The Bible said, had the first covenant been without error, we never have sought for a second. Hebrews 8:7 says, "For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second." It was not the laws that God gave which were faulty. Remember the contract scenario I pointed out earlier? The terms and conditions in the contract itself were not the problem. The problem is with those attempting to fulfill the contract. Mankind had inherited a sinful nature, and as a result, their body was dead due to sin. Their bodies were not capable of fulfilling the contract, even though their minds may have still delighted in the law of God. God knew this, and just like the landowner, he came to this earth in the likeness of sinful flesh. Romans 8:3. "For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin, condemned sin in the flesh." And just like the landowner, God came to do the work that man could not do, fulfill the covenant so that mankind could receive the promises of God. Matthew 5:17, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill." Just like I explained earlier, he came to fulfill the covenant so that mankind could receive the promises of God. This fulfillment didn't mean he destroyed it because it failed. As I showed earlier, fulfill just means to complete.